I will let everyone catch their breath for a moment. Thank you. Thank you all so much for staying with us and watching this important film and joining us for this next part of the conversation, which, again, I can't say enough how important this movie is, not only to be seen, I think, in Israel, but also here in the United States and presented by an organization from the Jewish community. I'm very excited to introduce Ori Givati, who, again, is from Breaking the Silence. He's the Advocacy Director. And you know him already, Avi Mugrabi. Avi, thank you so much for being here with us. I've been following your films for decades now, and I'm a big fan of your work, and it's an honor to have you. And this piece, of course, played at the New York Film Festival and is getting a lot of great attention. And to facilitate this conversation, our friend Gili Getz, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here as we take a couple more breaths to digest this really important document. I'd like to thank the other Israel Film Festival for another year of incredible conversation and deep dive into Israeli and Palestinian societies. It's truly, truly remarkable to have this film here and to have this conversation here. I watched the film last night, and you know, all day it's been yelling at me from the news headlines, the crackdown on Palestinian human rights organizations, the bombshell at the Washington Post about the biometrics, and we'll touch on that Breaking the Silence brought, the spyware in Palestinian phones. It keeps screaming at me all day. But the truth is that to have another thing that needs to be in the manual is that the Israeli society does not like talking about the occupation, and your work is challenging the society to look and talk about things it does not want to do because it has to deal with a lot of the things we saw. Can you talk a little bit about that? What it's like to engage a reluctant public on a topic that's so crucial and so fundamental, yet most society chooses not to engage.
Well, the truth is that Breaking the Silence, which I'm on the board of, I'm one of the founders of the organization, is really who's dealing with this issue of breaking or not breaking the silence. Me as a filmmaker, I only enjoy the fruits of Breaking the Silence work, or me as a board member of Breaking the Silence, I can encourage the people who do work in the researchers of the organization to collect more testimonies, but I personally, I don't have to daily encounter the issues of whether people agree or not to step forward and talk about their experience while serving in the occupied territories. Maybe Ori would like to elaborate on that.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. I think that it's very important to understand that it's everything we do, including this film that Avi made, and our work in Breaking the Silence, doing tours and lectures and briefings and advocacy, and this piece that maybe we'll talk about later that was published today in the Washington Post and so forth. All of our work is meant for what you mentioned, right? And I have to say that it's not only our job; it's our responsibility. And it's important for me to say this here because it's also the responsibility of everyone in this room. It's not a responsibility that's saved for only Israeli citizens that took part in the occupation as soldiers. Yeah? It's a responsibility of everyone who understands this situation. And it's very difficult to it's not nice to go to look at the mirror when you don't look well, right? You don't do it. And this is why our job is to force people to go and look in the mirror.
You know, I showed this film in many different places, and in one of the screenings in France, there was a professor of sociology sitting in the one of the front rows, and he asked to comment after the screening and said, "How come you, the Jewish people who have gone through such hardship, to say the least, during Second World War, find yourselves doing those things to the Palestinians?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, you're right. I mean, what can I say? But at the same time, how come you, the French, who have been under German occupation, Nazi occupation in Second World War, how could you have done what you have done in Indochine, in Indochina, and Algiers, etc., after all this?" And what this was not in order to shut his mouth, to shut him up. It was just to say that it's so much more comfortable to look at what others do rather than to look at what you are doing. And I think this is one of the greatest virtues of breaking the silence. We are looking at what we are doing. Unlike, if you remember Sir No Sir from 2,000 years ago, Vietnam War, we're not, this is not an organization about the welfare of the soldiers. This is an organization about what we as soldiers are doing, oppressing the Palestinian people. So yes, for the French it's very easy to look at us with criticism. And for us it's very easy to look at them with criticism. But to look introspectively is so much more complicated.
Great. I'll ask two more questions and we'll throw it to the audience if you have any questions. Can you talk a little bit about putting the film together? I understand the testimony, Breaking the Silence, started after the Second Intifada. In this film looks at the entire history of the occupation through these testimonies. Can you talk a little bit about why you structured that way and put yourself as this manual narrator? And what was that process like?
Yes, Breaking the Silence started after the Second Intifada and marked its timeline starting in 2000, the years that they served. They first interviewed their own generation. But recently we did a big project of bridging the gap from 2000 to 67 and collecting testimonies from soldiers who served in the occupied territories in those years. And then I stepped in as the filmmaker in the board and started looking into the material to see what we could make out of it. And I realized that there was a large scope film that could be made. Unlike the way that Breaking the Silence publishes videos, video testimonies. And I asked my colleagues to allow me to do my own film, not a Breaking the Silence film, but rather my own film out of this archive, out of this collection. Now, my first decision when editing the testimonies was to, and I didn't understand at the time that this was that actually at that moment I decided I'm going to do a manual, but my first decision was to concentrate on actions, mechanisms, procedures, orders, and not about reflections. In every interview, and Ori can, I'm sure, can testify to that, in every interview there comes a point where the speaker talks about what he felt when he did what he did, what he felt years later, and how this movement of thought or feelings changed the course of his political view. I decided to ignore all this. I wanted to deal only with what people have done and not with what they were thinking when they have done that. And once I made this decision, this is when the manual was born. Later, there was a need to categorize it. There was a need for a guide, an expert, an advisor to lead you through it. But this is all the outcome of this first basic decision: mechanisms, procedures, orders, and actions.
It is a successful occupation. Can you touch on the Washington Post article that came out yesterday? I recommend you read it. It's extraordinary. And also, last night we talked a little bit about what we see a lot of videos coming from the South Hebron Hills of settlers throwing rocks at Palestinians, and the military just stands by and looks at it. What type of culture? How does that culture created in the military, where the soldiers just look at stuff like that and do nothing? Is there an order? Is it just develops? A little insight into that.
Yeah. Okay, I think actually it's all intertwined, right? It's also intertwined with Avi's film. The different missions that we're sent to do, right? That some of them appear in the film, some don't, and there are so many other missions and so many other practices, like that we still find out about them, right? And the piece today that was published this morning in the Washington Post speaks about a new mission that we started hearing about from soldiers who served in the occupied territories the last year. So very, very new. It's called the Blue Wolf. And the Blue Wolf is a mission where soldiers basically walk around Palestinian cities. The main one is Hebron, but it also happens elsewhere. And they use this smartphone and take photos of every Palestinian that walks by them in order to create a database of photos of Palestinians, which later is used for other purposes. That's very brief, but I recommend everyone to read it. And I think that this is, first of all, one of the most important things that we're here to do, right? Breaking the silence with the years became larger, and we expanded the scope of our work, but basically all of it is based on this very, very a simple concept of bringing the words of the soldiers who serve in the occupied territories to the international and Israeli and anyone who wants to listen to them and to hear their criticism about what they did. And this is why I think, and it's another reason this article is so important, because it takes us back to the basics, right, of what we are here to do. The question about settler violence, it's a very large issue, right? It's an issue I can speak about now for 2 hours, right? Also comes up in the film. But basically what we see in the occupied territories today is that settlers attack Palestinians, steal their properties, steal olives, cut down olive trees, just like throw stones on homes, like destroy cars, just like I can go on forever with this. And the reality is that soldiers and police who are present while it's happening don't really do anything to stop it. And this is the main part here, because it's very easy to say, oh, settlers are bad. Settlers are violent people. And some settlers are violent people, but there are violent people everywhere in the world. And the difference here is that the system, the forces that are meant to stop violence, like the police in New York, yeah? I know. But
it's complicated.
Yeah, definitely. or yeah, you know what I mean? They not only don't stop it, but actually sometimes participate in it, right? Lately, we stopped saying soldiers standing idly by, because the soldiers, unfortunately, are not standing idly by. In many of the instances, the soldiers will throw stun grenades and gas grenades on the Palestinians who are attacked. And this is not because these soldiers are evil, racist people, okay? It's not, they are not. Most of them, 99.9% of them, are not. This is because the way the system is built leads them to one option, which is to attack the Palestinians and allow the settlers to attack the Palestinians as well, right? Because settlers are part of our day-to-day life as soldiers, and we go to have dinners with them. And settlers sometimes are part of our military activity and military training. And there are two separate law systems in the West Bank, right? The settlers are under the Israeli criminal law, and the Palestinians are under the military law, right? And we as soldiers, when we see a settler attacking a Palestinian, we go back to our orders, and we go back to our day-to-day life. Yeah? Why would I do anything to someone I had dinner with, I participate in military trainings and drills and activities with, yeah? And when I think about my orders, I don't have any order to stop the settlers, right? There isn't an order. Let's take Hebron. The order in Hebron, the mission that we receive in Hebron, is protect the Jewish settlement of Hebron. It's not protect everyone in your area, right? Why should I, as a soldier, do something that I didn't even receive the order to do, right? There are very, very few soldiers who will do something like this.
Oh, he says that all this is not racist. Oh, it's absolutely racist. We are brought up to defend anything that is Jewish and to defy anything that is not Jewish. Other words, Palestinian. It's absolute racism.
I'd like to open it to question. If anybody has a question, just raise your hand. We have the microphones right here. Anyone right here?
And I will
And then
check. I will remind the audience just to keep the questions short and respectful. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Maya. I'm from Pakistan. I absolutely loved the film. I wanted to know something. How did you encourage the soldiers to actually give testimonies like that? Was there a threat to their safety? Was there a threat to criticism? Was there an incentive maybe involved for them to come forward and, you know, give their names, you know, with video images?
thank you.
Okay, again, I didn't encourage anybody. Breaking the silence. These are the bad guys. Breaking the silence encouraged everyone you saw in the film to step forward and give their testimonies. And I don't think that with most of them there was much effort needed, because people wanted to speak. Also, many of the speakers in the film are certified leftists, and many of them are activists. So there was no need to do much to convince them. What is interesting about Israel is that until now, from what we have experienced, individuals who have provided their testimonies to breaking the silence were never, almost never attacked. The organization was severely attacked. The organization has gone through 3 or 4 years of attack from prime minister down to the lowest of the right-wing organizations, with people penetrating the organization in order to take videos showing that we are selling state secrets to the enemy, etc. But individual witnesses, as far as I know, beside one person who was the spokesman of the organization, were never targeted. So this is maybe how a big part of the story.
Yeah, I think maybe to your question, I also, in my prior position, was a researcher, and I interviewed around 120 soldiers like these, usually younger than these guys. But maybe I'll share with you like why I joined and why I chose to give my testimony. Every person that I met always has some moments, right? It's usually not one moment, but some moments that, you know, like they click in your head, one after the other. And for me, the most important moment was in my mandatory service, 2012. At that point, I am 100%. I believe in 100% of what we do. I am a tank commander in the military, stationed next to Gaza, and about to enter to participate in the Operation Pillar of Defense. And I was walking around my company, tanks all around, rockets are falling next to us, and I hear next to me, over here, so a group of reserves duty soldiers, right? It was mentioned in the film, people who are already after the mandatory service that came to just for this specific operation, and I overhear him say, "Wow, I can't wait to kill Arabs." Yeah, this is a group of soldiers. And I really remember this moment because it's the first time that it got me thinking, like, why? They didn't say, "Wow, I can't wait to go in Gaza and protect my family," right? Which is the reason I thought I'm there. Yeah? Or they didn't say, "I can't wait to get in Gaza and protect my beloved country." Yeah? They said, "I can't wait to get in Gaza and kill Arabs." And then I started thinking, how can I fit in this kind of situation? What led them to think this way? Because they're not awful people, mean or something, yeah? Like in a personal level. And why am I about to do this? Because I was about to do it. Eventually we didn't enter. But I was about to go in and very likely kill Palestinians.
And you still miss not having the opportunity to kill Arabs.
Yeah, I'm so happy I didn't get in, right? But it got me thinking. And similar moments, of course, I can give you another example. A soldier that I interviewed like 3 years ago, he participated in wars in Gaza and did really hardcore stuff. But for him, the moment was, and he told me that, he was standing in a tower, in a guarding tower inside his base. It's called a pillbox. And there was a Palestinian kid who was arrested at that day, and he stayed in the base in the night, that kid. And the person I interviewed was guarding in the night. And he saw this kid, Palestinian kid, alone outside, crying. And this made him think. And from that moment on, he started thinking about what's happening around him.
Thank you. Anybody else has a question? Right there.
Thank you so much. Apart from feeling nauseous, it's an awesome film. Thank you. My name is Ted. I live around here. I have been a friend of Breaking the Silence since you began. I am full of, I don't even know the word, certainly respect, but much more. One of the factors that we all know is that very often activities in the occupied territories are cited as violations of human rights or of international law. And there's a more or less of an idea of what those are by people in various fields. The problem is, of course, that in most of these arenas and in these courts, there's no teeth. There is no way to enforce anything that is agreed to or regulations that have been passed. And so life goes on in the occupation according to your manual. And there is nothing to curtail it, to restrain it, to call it into question. It has its own life. It's unto itself. My question is to ask you to put on your hats as prophets, whether you accept that or not. Where is this going to end? What is to stop the expropriation of the entire territory?
Or where
Well-
the hope is. Like, you know, the flip side of the question is, where is hope? If you look carefully.
Well, you know that there is no answer for this. Well, this is one of the biggest problems. We tell ourselves that and it's in a way a relief to the pain that never in history such a thing existed or lasted for so long. So it must end. But you know, history is not the chemistry of the table of chemistry. History has its own ways. So and in a way, we are also. This is like believing that history will take action. Is like believing that God will take action. It's like it's removing the responsibility from ourselves. And so I have no answer. I can't tell you that I can take some action that we can take some action that will move us forward towards some kind of a solution, some kind of an end of these horrors. On the other hand, and here I will contradict everything that I've just said and rely on history. No, because we need to comfort ourselves also. Look, 10 years before the end of apartheid, I don't think that anybody in this room would have been able to say, in 10 years, apartheid will be abolished, Mandela will become president, and South Africa will change forever. South Africa is not an ideal place, but it has changed, that's for sure. So maybe we are now on the first day of the next 10 years. And maybe 10 years from now, we will acknowledge that we didn't understand anything today. But this is such a big maybe, because 10 years from now, we could still be on the first day of the next 10 years. So it's not a promise.
I want to give just like my point of view. Look, I wasn't here and I wasn't doing this if I wasn't optimistic, because it's impossible, right? I can't personally work from a pessimistic angle because it's not motivating, right? And where I draw my motivation from is two things, and I think the first one is simple, right? We still get testimonies. I still meet new people every day that oppose the occupation and want to do something about it. But I think the second one is the most important one, and this is where we have to work more also as an international Jewish and community, and also general international community, and as Israelis, which is to continue improving and growing the cooperation between Palestinians and Israelis. But I'm not talking about coexistence. I'm not talking about living together and eating hummus, yeah, which is what many Israelis believe is like the way out. Yeah, we're talking about co-resistance. We're talking about going to the occupied territories to protest, to stand together in front of the occupation, and this is something that has been happening and has been growing a lot in recent years, especially in the South Hebron Hills, but also in other areas. And from this cooperation, co-resistance, I draw a lot of optimism from.
And we see that with the 6 human rights organizations. We see Israeli Jews standing up strong against false accusations of terrorism. It's quite remarkable. We have time for another question?
One more.
Great, one more. One of the speakers in the film is Tuli, who is in Combatants for Peace, who are doing joint resistance work, which is incredible.
Yes, hi. Thank you very much for the film. Obviously, very thought-provoking. Obviously, we're aware that there are many parts of the world where you have occupations of territory by countries and people who are living under oversight of a government that's not really their government of choice. I think of a long-standing occupation in China with Tibet, for example. And nobody can imagine Chinese soldiers being able to give testimony and speak openly about their experiences of serving in that type of environment. Would you say, or do you feel that the fact that, notwithstanding what you refer to as some criticism and some pressure from the government, the mere fact that breaking the silence can exist openly within Israel, and that thousands of soldiers can come forward and speak and give the testimony, some of which we saw in the film, and that you've been able to make this film based in Israel, is a way to sort of see and recognize that there is an openness in Israeli society that is really quite uncommon, and you wouldn't see sort of freely in many, many other parts of the world. And is that not sort of a way forward and a sort of a sign of hope for you?
No. Look, the Israeli society is very sophisticated. And we have created a charade of a democracy. Yes, for us, Jews, there's a wonderful democracy. The fact that there are 5 million others who are under military dictatorship that we run doesn't scratch our democracy. So yes, and in Israel, free speech for citizens, for Jews, is there, and at large, but this is a charade. This is just another way to create an impression that is false. This cannot be a democracy if we are militarily oppressing 5 million Palestinians. It's absolutely impossible.
Yeah, I completely agree with Avi. And I'll just add that we just have to look at reality today, right? People that we interview are terrified. 99.9% of people we interview are terrified that their friends or families will even know that they did the interview. It's extremely rare to find people like in this film that agree even to show their faces, okay? People are afraid that they will lose their jobs. People are afraid that they will lose their families, okay? So this is the first thing. The second thing is that I think that in many ways, I'm not blaming you, I'm just like giving the argument. In many ways, this very question shows where we are. Because it should be the most obvious thing in the world that people are allowed to speak out against their government. It shouldn't be seen as something that's like, oh wow, soldiers are allowed to speak out against their government. It should be the most basic thing that no one should even think about. Yeah? And the fact that we start to see it as something that is not taken for granted shows us exactly the trajectory that we are on, right? And the last point on this, what Gili just mentioned, yeah? 2 weeks ago, Israel declared 6 of the most prominent human rights organizations in Palestine as terrorist groups, yeah? This is, I can't even start, yeah? Explaining how terrible and how, like, how damaging and this move is to Palestinian civil society. And if Palestinian civil society is declared as terrorist organizations, we can't say that because some Israeli groups are still allowed to function, it's a silver lining. It's actually the opposite. In many times you will see Israeli officials go up on the UN stage or something like this, say, oh, we have such a thriving civil society. And the next day, that same person will participate in an attack against Breaking the Silence or any other organization, right? So it's basically, in many ways, used against us. And with that, I will say, yes, we are still allowed to operate, and we will use that in order to fight the occupation. But it doesn't show good signs about Israel, in my opinion.
Yes, and by the way, the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, already legislated 2 laws called breaking the silence laws. Breaking the silence law, one had to do with financing, and breaking the silence law 2 had to do with education, with reaching out to schools and students. So it's a big charade. Just like when you say Jewish and democratic, the idea behind democracy is that each person has a vote. The idea behind the Jewish state is that there must be a Jewish majority. So otherwise, there will not be no Jewish state. And this is why we're doing all this.
I want to thank you. I want to thank Avi for the film and for being here tonight. I want to thank Ori for all of his work. Gili, thank you for conducting this conversation.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
I really want to thank all of you for being a part of this, for coming out to this, for engaging, for thinking, for watching, for disagreeing. It's okay to disagree too. We want to continue this conversation. It will continue with many of our films here this week.